The gunshots hadn't stopped echoing when he saw her. Kang Min-ho stood in the wreckage of a nightclub that used to belong to his rivals, blood on his knuckles, chaos behind him, and there she was. Tiana. Frozen in the doorway, evening gown torn at the shoulder, terror and fire both burning in her eyes. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to be his blind date. But fate didn't care about plans. Their eyes locked across the smoke-filled room, and something ancient, something dangerous, cracked open inside his chest. He had killed men without blinking. He had buried betrayal without mourning it. But nothing had ever made his heart stop like this woman standing in the wreckage, refusing to look away from him. Her out safely. He barked to his men, voice cold as steel, eyes never leaving her face. She would run from him that night. But Min-ho already knew. He was never letting her go again. Welcome to Afro Soul Stories. Please like, share, and subscribe. 3 hours earlier, none of this chaos existed. Tiana had been sitting stiffly in a private booth at Seoul's most exclusive restaurant, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her dress, wondering how her best friend Somi had talked her into this. Just one blind date, Somi had promised. He's rich, he's respectful, and honestly, girl, you need to get out more. What Somi hadn't mentioned was that the man walking through the restaurant doors, drawing every eye in the room like gravity itself, was Kang Min-ho, heir to an empire built on secrets, feared by police commissioners and worshipped by the underworld. Tiana didn't know his name yet. She only knew that when he sat across from her, adjusting his cufflinks with unnerving calm, the air in the room seemed to thin. Staring, he said, the corner of his mouth lifting. Intimidating, she shot back, refusing to shrink. Should I be worried? Something flickered behind his dark eyes, surprise maybe. Most people trembled in his presence. This woman, with her deep brown skin catching the candlelight and her natural curls framing a face unwilling to bow, looked at him like he was simply a man. Not a legend. Not a threat. Just a man who'd been rude enough to make her wait 4 minutes. He found that he liked it far too much. My apologies, Min-ho said smoothly, though apologies rarely left his mouth. I don't usually do this, blind dates. Neither do I, Tiana admitted, some of her guard slipping. But my friend insisted you weren't a serial killer, so. He laughed, a short, genuine sound that startled even himself. His bodyguards near the entrance exchanged a glance neither dared voice aloud. Kang Min-ho did not laugh in public. Kang Min-ho did not let his shoulders relax like that. But this woman had barely been in his presence 10 minutes, and already the ice around him was cracking. Dinner unfolded like a slow unraveling of 2 guarded people. Tiana learned he owned half the buildings on the block they were dining in, though he never said it like a boast, more like a fact he found tiresome. He learned she was a Nigerian architect who'd moved to Seoul 2 years ago, chasing a design fellowship, and if she was honest, chasing distance from a life that had grown too small back home. You designed that community center in Itaewon, he said suddenly, something like admiration crossing his sharp features. I walked past it last spring. The way the light falls through the atrium at sunset, I've never seen anything like it. Tiana blinked, genuinely caught off guard. You noticed that? I notice everything, he said quietly, and for a moment his gaze dropped to her lips before snapping back up, as if he'd caught himself doing something forbidden. Her pulse fluttered traitorously. She told herself it was just wine. It wasn't just wine. By the time dessert arrived, she had almost forgotten to be wary of him, almost forgotten the whispered warning Somi had given her about dangerous men with good tailoring. Almost. Because that was when Min-ho's phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times, and the warmth in his eyes vanished like a door slamming shut. Excuse me, he said, voice suddenly flat, controlled. I need 5 minutes. She watched him walk away, watched 3 men in dark suits fall into step around him like shadows, watched the restaurant staff suddenly move a little faster, speak a little softer. Something cold slid down her spine. Who exactly had she agreed to have dinner with? He returned 8 minutes later, jaw tight, tie slightly loosened, but his voice was gentle when he sat back down. I apologize. Business. What kind of business requires 3 bodyguards? Tiana asked before she could stop herself. Min-ho studied her for a long moment, long enough that she almost regretted asking. Then quietly, the kind I don't wish to bring anywhere near you. It should have scared her off. Instead, something in his voice, protective, almost pained, made her chest ache in a way she didn't understand. I should go, she said softly, gathering her purse, though her feet didn't move as fast as her words suggested. Me walk you out. He stood immediately, offering his arm with old-fashioned formality that felt strange coming from a man who, moments earlier, radiated barely leashed danger. Outside, the Seoul night was cool, neon light washing over wet pavement. Tiana turned to say goodbye, a polite, forgettable ending to a blind date she'd never repeat. Instead, Min-ho reached out, gently tucking a stray curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her jaw. "I don't believe in fate," he murmured, dark eyes searching hers. "But I think I might tonight." Breath caught. Every instinct told her to step back. She didn't. "Mr. Kang Min-ho," he corrected softly. "Just Min-ho, when it's you." That should have been the end of it, a beautiful, dangerous man and a stolen moment under city lights, filed away as a memory too intense to repeat. But 2 days later, a black car was waiting outside her office when she left work. "I didn't order a car," she told the driver, startled. "Mr. Kang did," the driver replied simply, as if that explained everything. It became a pattern. Flowers with no note but her favorite color. A rare architecture book she'd mentioned once in passing delivered to her desk. A message that simply read, "Dinner Friday. I won't take no easily," Somi practically screamed when she heard. "Girl, do you understand who Kang Min-ho is? He doesn't chase anyone. He has people chase things for him." "That's what worries me," Tiana admitted, staring at her phone at his name glowing on the screen. "He's not supposed to feel this. Real." But he did feel real. Devastatingly real. And against every warning bell in her head, she typed back, "Friday works." Friday arrived wrapped in golden evening light, and Min-ho picked her up himself, no driver, no bodyguards trailing visibly, though she suspected they weren't far. He took her to a rooftop garden overlooking the Han River, string lights woven through cherry blossom branches too early for the season, clearly arranged just for her. "You did all this," she breathed, turning in a slow circle. "I wanted to see you smile like that," he admitted, hands in his pockets, looking almost boyish despite the danger that clung to him like cologne. "Was it worth it?" "You have no idea," she whispered. They talked for hours, really talked, the kind of conversation that peeled back armor layer by layer. He told her carefully about growing up the son of a man who built an empire on fear, about learning early that softness was a weakness to be hidden, buried, disguised as steel. She told him about leaving Lagos, about a family that loved her but never understood her hunger to build things that mattered, about loneliness dressed up as independence. "The first person in years who's asked me anything real," Min-ho said quietly, watching the river lights shimmer. "Everyone else just wants something from me." "What do I want then?" Tiana asked, testing him. He turned to face her fully, dark eyes intense in the low light. "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." Air between them thickened. Neither moved for a long moment, close enough to feel each other's warmth, breath mingling in the cool night air. Then slowly, deliberately, he reached up and cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone like she was something precious and terrifying all at once. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, voice rough, "and I will." She didn't tell him to stop. The kiss, when it finally came, was soft, achingly soft for a man who commanded fear with a single glance. His lips brushed hers like a question, and when she answered by leaning in, his hand slid to the small of her back, pulling her close like he'd been starving for exactly this. The kiss deepened, slow and searching, and somewhere in the tangle of cherry blossoms and city lights, Tiana felt the last of her defenses crumble. When they finally broke apart, breathless, foreheads resting together, Min-ho exhaled like a man setting down a weight he'd carried for years. "I don't do this," he admitted hoarsely. "I don't let people close." "Then why me?" she whispered. "Because you didn't ask to get close," he said. "You just arrived like a storm I never saw coming." From that night forward, something between them shifted permanently. It wasn't official, not yet, but it was undeniable. Min-ho began showing up at her office unannounced, always with some excuse, a document to sign nearby, a meeting that happened to end near her building. Tiana knew better. She let herself enjoy it anyway. The following week, her firm hosted a gala for a new development partnership. Investors, architects, city officials, all mingling under crystal chandeliers. Min-ho arrived at her side like he belonged there, one hand resting possessively at the small of her back as they moved through the crowd. That was when David Cho found her. David was a visiting consultant from the New York office. Charming, polished, and entirely too comfortable touching Tiana's arm as he laughed at his own jokes. "I've heard incredible things about your Itaewon project," he said, leaning closer than necessary. "You have to let me take you to dinner sometime. Pick your brilliant brain." "That won't be necessary." Min-ho said before Tiana could answer, his voice deceptively calm, though the temperature around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. David blinked, clearly unfamiliar with the danger standing beside her. "And you are. The reason you should reconsider," Min-ho replied, a razor-thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tiana pressed a hand to his chest, half amused, half alarmed at the tension radiating off him. "Min-ho," she murmured under her breath. "Behave." "I am behaving," he said, dark eyes never leaving David. "You should see me when I don't." David excused himself quickly, suddenly remembering an urgent phone call. Tiana turned to Min-ho, arms crossed, fighting a smile. "That was excessive." "That was restrained," he corrected, finally looking at her, jealousy still simmering beneath the surface. "I don't share what's mine." "Not yours," she said softly, though the words lacked real conviction. He stepped closer, voice dropping to something intimate, dangerous. "Not yet." Tension between them coiled tighter over the following days, heated glances across rooms, fingers brushing that lingered too long, unfinished sentences thick with things unsaid. Everyone around them could feel it. Somi certainly did. "Both going to combust," she told Tiana over coffee. "Just saying." But danger, as it always did in Min-ho's world, arrived uninvited. It started with a warning, a rival syndicate. The Chois, furious over territory Min-ho had claimed months earlier, decided the best way to wound him wasn't through his businesses or his men. It was through the one thing they'd noticed him actually protect, her. A black sedan followed Tiana's car for 3 blocks one evening before peeling away. She dismissed it as paranoia. Min-ho did not. "From now on, you have a driver," he told her that night, voice hard, allowing no argument. "And someone watching your building." "Min-ho, that's excessive. That's non-negotiable," he cut in, gripping her shoulders gently but firmly, dark eyes burning with barely restrained fear disguised as anger. "You don't understand what these people are capable of. I won't lose you because I was too slow to protect you." The word lose hung in the air between them, revealing more than he intended. "Scared," Tiana realized softly, reaching up to touch his jaw. "Terrified," he admitted, voice breaking slightly. "For the first time in my life, I have something to lose, and I don't know how to survive losing it." That confession cracked something open between them completely. 3 nights later, during a sudden summer storm that knocked out power across half the district, Tiana found herself at Min-ho's penthouse, having agreed, against every warning in her head, to wait out the storm there rather than risk the drive home. Candlelight flickered across the room as thunder rattled the windows. Min-ho poured them both wine, hands not quite steady, and for once, the untouchable crime boss looked entirely undone. "I keep waiting to wake up," he admitted quietly, sitting beside her on the couch, close enough that his knee brushed hers. "Keep waiting for this to be some fever dream I invented because I was tired of being alone." "I'm real," Tiana whispered, setting her glass down. "Prove it," he said, voice rough with need he'd been suppressing for weeks. She closed the distance between them, and this time there was no hesitation. His hands framed her face like she was something sacred, and when their lips met, it wasn't soft like before. It was desperate, hungry, weeks of restraint finally breaking loose. He murmured her name against her mouth like a prayer, like a confession, like a man finally allowing himself to want something without apology. The storm raged outside as candlelight danced across the room, and somewhere between whispered names and trembling breath, the space between them disappeared entirely. What followed was tender and consuming, a slow unraveling of walls neither had meant to lower, emotion overflowing into every touch, every murmured promise, every moment where fear and desire tangled until they were indistinguishable. By the time the storm passed, so had the last of their defenses. Morning came softer than either expected, gray light filtering through rain-streaked windows, Tiana waking wrapped in unfamiliar sheets that smelled like him. For a moment, peace. Then, panic. What have I done? She dressed quietly, careful not to wake him, mind spinning with everything the night had cracked open. This wasn't just attraction anymore. This was something dangerous, something that could ruin her carefully built independent life, something tied to a world of violence she barely understood. He'll regret this. He'll realize I'm not worth the risk. Men like him don't stay. The fear, old and familiar, whispered louder than anything he'd said the night before. By the time Min-ho stirred awake, reaching instinctively for her side of the bed, she was already gone, a hastily scrawled note the only trace she'd been there at all. "I'm sorry. I need space to think." Min-ho stared at the note for a long moment, jaw tightening, something raw and wounded flashing across his features before hardening into resolve. "No," he said quietly to the empty room. "Not like this, not again." He was already reaching for his phone, already calling his driver, already refusing to let her run from something that terrified them both equally. She wouldn't answer his calls, wouldn't answer his messages, each one softer than the last. "Talk to me. Whatever you're afraid of, we'll face it together. Please, Tiana." By the third day, worry curdled into something sharper in his chest. He showed up at her office, ignoring the stairs, ignoring protocol, standing in front of her desk like a man who'd walked through fire to get there. "You don't get to disappear," he said, voice low, controlled fury barely masking the hurt beneath it. "Not after that night. Not after everything you said." "I didn't say anything," Tiana replied, arms wrapped around herself, refusing to meet his eyes. "You said my name like it meant something," he shot back, stepping closer. "You don't get to take that back because you're scared." "I should be scared," she finally snapped, eyes glistening. "You live in a world of danger and violence, Min-ho. Men like you don't build lives with women like me. You use us, protect us for a while, then move on when it becomes inconvenient. I've seen it happen. I won't be someone's beautiful mistake." Something in his expression shattered. He crossed the remaining distance between them, gently but firmly gripping her arms. "Look at me," he demanded, voice thick with emotion. "I have buried enemies without remorse. I have built an empire on fear. And in 29 years, I have never wanted to build a life with anyone. Until you." Tears slipped down her cheeks despite her best efforts. "How do I know you mean that?" "Because I'm standing in your office in broad daylight," he said, "letting every enemy I have see exactly what I'm not willing to lose. That's not a man protecting a secret. That's a man declaring war for the woman he loves." The word loves hung between them, raw and unguarded. Tiana didn't get the chance to answer him. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, followed by a photo that made her blood run cold. Somi, blindfolded, tied to a chair in a room she didn't recognize. Beneath it, a single line. "Tell Kang Min-ho his empire has a price. Come alone or she disappears." "No," Tiana whispered, hands trembling as she showed him the screen. Min-ho's face went deadly still, the calm before devastation. "The Choi's," he said, voice flat with fury. "They think this makes them powerful, it makes them dead." "Oh, that's my friend. I know exactly who it is," he cut in, already dialing, already barking coordinates and orders to his men in rapid Korean. "And I know exactly where they're keeping her. This isn't their first mistake tonight. It'll be their last." Tiana grabbed his arm. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not," he said sharply, though his eyes softened at her fear. "I already almost lost you once this week. I won't risk it again." "She's my best friend," Tiana said, voice breaking. "I can't sit here and do nothing." He hesitated only a moment before pulling her into a fierce, bruising kiss, desperate, promising, unafraid. "Stay in the car, stay behind my men. If anything happens to you, I burn their entire organization to ash." "Do you understand me?" She nodded, tears in her eyes, terror and love tangled together as they sped toward the warehouse district. The building was dark, industrial, silent in the way that promised violence. Min-ho moved through it like a man who'd been born for exactly this, cold, precise, lethal. His men fanned out ahead, disarming guards with brutal efficiency while Tiana stayed pressed against the car, heart hammering. Gunfire erupted somewhere inside. She flinched, praying, hands clasped so tight her knuckles ached. Minutes stretched into eternity before the warehouse door burst open, Min-ho emerging with Somi, shaken but unharmed, supported against his side. Behind them, his men secured the last of the Choi enforcers, the rival threat crumbling as quickly as it had risen. Tiana ran to them, pulling Somi into a fierce hug, sobbing with relief. Over her friend's shoulder, her eyes found Min-ho, blood on his knuckles, tie gone, chest heaving, and an expression on his face she'd never forget. Raw, unguarded devotion, the look of a man who would burn the world down and call it nothing at all if it meant keeping her safe. "You came for us," she breathed. "I will always come for you," he said, closing the distance between them, cupping her face like she was the only steady thing left in a violent world. That was never a question. In the weeks that followed, the Choi syndicate crumbled entirely. Min-ho's retaliation swift, thorough, and absolute, though he made certain none of the danger touched Tiana or Somi again. Peace, fragile and hard one, settled over their lives. It was Somi, of all people, who pushed them toward the next step. "Life's too short and too dangerous for almost," she told Tiana one evening. You already know how you feel. Stop being scared of it. So when Min-ho invited Tiana to a rooftop dinner one autumn evening, the same rooftop garden where their first real kiss had happened, cherry blossoms long gone, but string lights still glowing warm against the dark sky, she arrived with her heart wide open instead of guarded. He was waiting for her, more nervous than she'd ever seen him, hands clasped tightly behind his back. Faced rival syndicates without flinching, he admitted, voice unsteady. I've stared down men with guns and never felt my pulse rise. But you, Tiana, you terrify me more than any of it, because losing you would break something in me nothing could ever fix. He dropped to one knee, producing a small velvet box, dark eyes glistening with emotion he no longer bothered hiding. I don't just want to protect you, he said. I want to build a life with you, wake up beside you, grow old fighting with you about ridiculous things and making up in ways that matter. Marry me, Tiana. Let me spend the rest of my life proving you were right to stay. Tears streamed freely down her face as she pulled him up, kissing him before the words even left her mouth. Yes, she breathed against his lips. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Rooftop erupted in quiet applause. His men, positioned discreetly at the edges, unable to hide their smiles at seeing their feared boss undone completely by love. Their wedding took place the following spring, cherry blossoms finally in full bloom, draping the same rooftop garden in soft pink and white. Tiana wore a gown that honored both her Nigerian heritage and her new life in Seoul, vibrant gold, threading through elegant lace, her curls crowned with delicate flowers. Min-ho, usually so composed, couldn't stop the tremor in his hands as she walked toward him, couldn't stop the tears he'd once believed himself incapable of shedding. You saved me, he whispered as they exchanged vows, loud enough only for her to hear. Long before I ever saved you. Family had flown in from Lagos, mixing seamlessly with Seoul's most powerful figures, all bowing not to fear this time, but to love, undeniable, fierce, and finally allowed to exist in the open. A year later, Tiana stood on that same rooftop at sunset, one hand resting gently against the curve of her belly, watching Min-ho, Seoul's most feared, most respected man, kneel down to speak softly to the life growing inside her. This one already has your stubbornness, he murmured, feeling a firm kick against his palm, laughing in a way that still surprised everyone who witnessed it. And your protectiveness, Tiana added, running her fingers through his hair, heart full in a way she'd once believed impossible for someone like her to find with someone like him. He rose, pulling her close, resting his forehead against hers as the sun dipped golden over the Han River, the same view where impossible had first begun to feel possible. No empire, no danger, no enemy, he murmured, will ever mean more to me than this, than you, than us. And beneath a sky painted gold and pink, two people who should never have collided, a Nigerian architect and a Korean crime boss, proved that love, fierce and unguarded, could survive anything the world threw against it.